Good morning. Happy Sunday, everyone. No, you saw the thumbnail, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you, let's get to the point. If you own an M8, this is certainly a video I would highly recommend that you watch. The thumbnail is not clickbait. It's a concern I've had for many years. I thought I would share it with you guys, considering a new part that had come out from S&S. That being said, I was going to reserve Sundays as Baxter's day off for the new channel. But you got to have one of those to produce those videos for that day. But regardless, I felt this one was of a much, much higher priority. So today is going to be a bit of a tech video, a PSA if you want to call it that. And if you own an M8, I highly recommend you watch this video. So let's just go ahead and get right to the point. This is a great new product that S&S released recently, a fuel rail for Harley-Davidsons, for M8 touring models specifically. And where this came from was, from the factory. This is a full assembly here with a line attached in the injectors. You can see the fuel rail here is made out of a plastic. I believe it's Delrin, but it's made out of a plastic. Now, let's start by talking about the product that came out from S&S, an aluminum billet version of that fuel rail. It certainly has its advantages. There are several things that I like about it. For example, the nipple that comes out where you engage your fuel line there, it can be replaced. So if you happen to chip or break it or have an issue, you don't have to replace the entire fuel rail. You can replace just that nipple, which is a fantastic aspect. There's another aspect that could be beneficial. I have to admit, I haven't done a lot of testing on this yet. I hope to, but there's a theory that's being talked among fuel injection guys. And that theory is, keep in mind a fuel injector is an oscillating solenoid. It moves at a very, very rapid pace. And the thought is that the billet aluminum on that fuel rail has a better resonance. It's more dense and can actually allow for more accurate and precise fuel delivery because of the increased rigidity of it. I can't honestly tell you whether or not I believe that is true, simply because I haven't had the opportunity to test it in that finite of a capacity. What I can tell you is I've used that rail, and it works and fits wonderfully. But in using it, I thought this would be a very important detail to share with you guys. Whether or not you decide to purchase that part from us for your bike and make that upgrade, I believe it has true value. Whether or not you decide to add that to your parts list, this is still an issue that you should be aware of. And if you change that fuel rail, you certainly should take my advice on this one. Now, back in 2017, when the M8 was released, this was the fuel line. And I want you to look very closely here at the end, and you'll notice this is a 22 part number. See, 022. This was original to the 2017 models, and I actually saw this style of fuel line all the way up until around 19 or 20 models. So sometime around that time, around 19, I started to observe a small issue. And then I learned of other significant issues, and it has to do with the engagement. Now, this is the same fuel line, but I have removed the plastic collar. You can see where it says 22. And look real close in there. You see those fingers, those little tiny metal fingers that are in there. Now, many, when they would replace their throttle body or, take the bike apart, that sort of thing, swap a throttle body, they would remove this fuel line from that nipple, all right? And actually, it's very difficult to remove, and the idea being you squeeze down on that collar, and when you squeeze down on that, it pulls those little fingers in, and then you can slide it off. The problem was fuel leaks. I started seeing fuel leaks develop, and even heard some stories of these fuel lines disengaging under operation. Needless to say, that is a very, very dangerous thing, fuel leaking on a hot motorcycle. So then I started doing other things, like I would, pull this off very, very carefully. I would go to put it back on, and I would push as hard as I could, moving in all four directions to get those fingers to engage. And yet I could take and pull just a little bit on the fuel line. Remember, we're operating at about 58 PSI here. I could pull just a little bit on the fuel line, and it would come off. So back then, many of you that I did builds for over the past few years, I had mentioned to you well, let me rewind for a second. The second part I'm going to show you, when I realized that that was a problem, I basically put a rule in force in the shop, and that was, if you're going to change a throttle body, never ever remove the fuel line from the fuel rail. Just move it as an assembly to the throttle body. And that was the fix for a while. Not disturbing it. Specific instructions. Don't twist. Don't do anything. Well, sometime around, I think it was around 2020, maybe 2021, an upgrade to that fuel line became available. And the motor company started using it as a standard install on new production bikes. And you'll see here, this is a 22A part number. But notice the big difference here. All right, notice this metal coupler versus that. This is a significantly better, more resilient, and more trustworthy connection on that nipple. And this fuel line here is readily available from your Harley dealer. And you would just simply ask for the 22A. Now, I saw some models, like I have a couple of M8s in here now that are 2018, 2019 models. I had a 2020 model that also had this style of fuel line on it. And so I can't say exactly which year. But here's where I'm going with the PSA on this whole thing, guys. Whether or not you are doing an upgrade to your bike, whether or not you're building the engine, in my mind, is irrelevant. There's a potential that this could be a problem for you. So I would highly recommend that you walk out of your garage and take a look at your fuel line, where it connects to your fuel rail on top of your throttle body. If you see a connector like this plastic thing, it is worth your safety, your time, your money, and your life, I'm not over-exaggerating, to replace this fuel line, okay? So even if you're not making an upgrade of any kind, get one of these and replace it, all right? Second thing is, if you are purchasing one of the S&S Fuel Rails, I would also highly, highly recommend that you also purchase from your Harley dealer a brand new fuel line, and make sure that you ask for the 22A model, and it should have that metal connector. Now, the thing about these quick connect type connectors with anything, even down to computer connectors, it's another reason, just as I digress for a second, when motor companies started putting ECMs on top of the batteries, early on, it was common practice, because you have to deal with that ECM to change a battery. They would disconnect that ECM connector, plug it back in, and they were unplugging that ECM and putting it back in. But those little tiny pin connectors in there were only designed to be connected and disconnected just a few times, maybe 8 to 10 times before they start to stretch out. The idea is, when you get into certain types of connectors like this, the idea is for them to be a quick connect, but then you have things called quick disconnects. And sometimes it's a design element. Every time you're pulling back on this collar, you're not sure how much you're deforming those clips. You're not sure what the engagement is, and technically you should be able to put it back on there and pull. There's a specification on it. I don't recall what it is. I think it's 9 or 10 pounds of force you should be able to pull, but it's not worth the chance. In other words, just trust me on this one. Okay? So anyway, guys, I hope you found this to be a very helpful tip. That S&S Fuel Rail, I think it's around $150. I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up. I believe it is certainly worth the price, just because you can replace that nipple if you happen to ever damage it or break it. It's also great. I believe that the theory of the improved resonance in going with the billet aluminum versus the plastic, but we also know it's a high heat environment. As many of you know, one of the reasons we use S&S's metal intakes, even if we're not making a massive power increase, we'll use a 55 millimeter aluminum intake on there because the heat, the heads. I'm sure you guys have seen videos where the intakes have deformed, melted, softened a little bit. So these upgrades are worth it. Whether or not your goal is to actually, do a massive performance gain. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Sorry it's been so long since I've made one. I've actually just been hammering out. We had some crazy weather last night. It's actually been raining for, I think, 10, 11 days straight. It's kind of crazy. We've got some flooding in low-lying areas and stuff. And now after the crazy storms that went through last night, we're now back down to 30 degrees again. So I'm hoping in the next 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, that the weather's going to turn and I don't have the risk of power going out and all that stuff in these crazy storms. And I can get all these bikes. I've got about 8 bikes getting ready to roll out of here. I just need to do some tuning, get final done, and then another batch coming in. And then at some point when I get caught up with that a little bit, Baxter stay off, man. We got a lot of stuff happening. The panhead, the build series with the antique bikes, painting the panel from the All Kids bike thing. We got a lot of stuff to do. So, guys, I appreciate you very much. Thanks for watching, and do me a favor, share this with your friends. I think people need to know. Take care of yourselves and each other. Stay safe out there. Have a good one.